1999. We didn't do this when we did our original 1999 episode because that was like our third episode. So we weren't doing lists yet. Jake, I went first when we did our 1990 redo. Why don't you go first now?
I would love to. And this is an amazing year for movies. This was right around the time I was still in high school then. I was really, really getting into movies. And this is a formative year for me. And I still think, a lot of really, really great movies that hold up. I've got a ton of honorable mentions. I'm not going to say a lot about them. I just want to run through a really brief list of the movies that were just outside of my top 10. So you can kind of see.
When you say just outside your top 10, are you just going to list your 11 to 20?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay, good. It gives me permission to do the same. Great.
Absolutely. And I think for this year, it's worth doing because, like I said, there are so many, I think, great movies that, like, if I just did my top 10, people would be like, oh gosh, what about these? But I mean, there's just so many great movies, I think, from this year. I think it's worth mentioning them. But like I said, I'll do it quickly, so I don't want to take up too much of the time. These are movies that were, 11 through 20 for me. 20 is Man on the Moon. Number 19, Norman Jewison's The Hurricane, biopic about Reuben Hurricane Carter. Number 18, I have The Matrix. Number 17, I have Mike Leigh's theater drama, Topsy Turvy. Number 16, I have Frank Oz's Bowfinger, a comedy that I've spoken about many times how much I love. Number 15 is Toy Story 2. Number 14, I have Disney's Tarzan. Number 13, Scorsese's Bringing Out the Dead, one of my favorite Nicolas Cage performances. Number 12.
What was that at 14?
That was 13, is Bringing Out the Dead.
Oh, okay. I was getting, it's at 14 for me. So I was okay. Same.
12, a movie Brad and I have both talked about a lot, David Lynch's The Straight Story. And number 11, a movie that had been out in Japan but didn't come to the US until 1999, is Princess Mononoke. All right, good
list. I got a lot of stuff from there, but I'm going to argue about spaces maybe on this, but go on.
Yes, all right. So that will bring us to my official top 10. My number 10 is Alexander Payne's Election. We spoke about this movie quite a lot on our Alexander Payne podcast. I think it's just still very great. One of the best high school movies, I think, in at least probably of all time. Reese Witherspoon's amazing in this. Matthew Broderick is amazing in it. Saw it recently, still holds up. Still my top 10. Number 9 is Kimberly Pierce's drama Boys Don't Cry, the first movie, or the first Oscar that Hilary Swank won, where she played a transgender individual. I don't know how this movie would be received today, but
I think I've seen people complain.
I think I have too. Yeah, I think it's been retroactively, kind of seen as maybe not so appropriate, but at the time it was pretty groundbreaking. I think at the time, and seen as a pretty bold piece of filmmaking. I think as a film, it's stands up as pretty strong. The performances are very good. It's still my number 9 movie of the year. Number 8.
I think generally people don't like non-trans actors playing trans characters anymore.
Totally understand that, and I think that's a very valid point. But for 1999, just as a society, we weren't there yet. And for this movie to even be made in 1999 is, I still think, impressive. Number 8, the last film by the great Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut, about Tom Cruise going on a sexual awakening through the streets of New York City one night. I think this movie is great. My wife hasn't seen it, and we're hopefully going to be watching it soon. It's the 25th anniversary of 1999 this year, so a lot of movies having these movies having their anniversary. So we've been thinking about watching this one, but I think it's a great Tom Cruise performance. I think there's just a lot of cool stuff going on in this movie. Sidney Pollack has a great role in this movie, and so does Todd Field. So there's a couple of really interesting director performances in this. I really love that movie.
Both of those guys, to be fair, are also actors.
Also true, but they're known more for being directors.
Yeah. Well, now Todd Field was an actor. He was in Twister. I mean, he's in a lot of movies.
I forgot that until we watched Twister a couple of weeks ago and saw his name in the opening credits, and I got excited. But yeah, he's cool. I love it. And yeah, it's just a great movie. Number 7, another movie by a master, Pedro Almodovar's All About My Mother. Hard to explain what this is about without just going through the letterbox, but it says it's following the tragic death of her teenage son. Manuela travels from Madrid to Barcelona in an attempt to contact the long-estranged father the boy never knew. She reunites with an old friend, an outspoken transgender sex worker, and befriends a troubled actress and a pregnant HIV-positive nun. So there's a lot going on in this movie, but it's Almodovar. He's got a gift for dialogue. He gets great performances out of all of his actors. It's a really great movie.
That movie sounds like the parody of Boys Don't Cry.
It kind of does when you read it all out loud. But I promise, it's a really wonderful film. My number 6 is the best animated film of 1999. That's The Iron Giant. I think most of us are familiar with that story. It's beautiful movie, the best thing Vin Diesel has ever done. Number 5, a movie we've also talked about quite a bit on this podcast in one form or another, is The Talented Mr. Ripley, Anthony Minghella's film about a kind of sociopathic status chaser. played by
Social Climber. Yeah.
Social Climber, that's the word I was looking for. Yep. Matt Damon, Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, Kate Blanchett, all young and beautiful in a beautiful location. Number 4, Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia, which has a bunch of different stories all intersecting with each other, featuring just a laundry list of amazing performances. You've got your Philip Seymour Hoffman, Julianne Moore, Tom Cruise, giving one of his most famous performances, and really probably should have won an Oscar that year. They gave it to Michael Caine for The Cider House Rules.
You've complained about that a lot on this podcast.
Yeah, because who likes The Cider House Rules? Name one person in your life who has ever said, Brad, have you seen The Cider House Rules?
Can't name one, and also never did it, so couldn't say.
But like Magnolia, I mean, people talk about Magnolia, and people remember that character Tom Cruise played. And Magnolia is a great film. Paul Thomas Anderson is great. Yeah, a lot of great stuff in that movie. Number 3 is a film that I recently saw a headline about. George Clooney was talking about this movie again. It's a movie called Three Kings that takes place during the Iraq War, and it's probably more famous now for being known as a movie that George Clooney literally fist fought with his director on because he is such an asshole. That's David O. Russell is the writer and director. However, this movie is amazing. It's got probably the best Mark Wahlberg performance. Spike Jonze is in this movie. Clooney is amazing in this movie. It's the movie where the 3 soldiers, Clooney, Wahlberg, and Spike Jonze, are trying to rescue Iraqi citizens during the war. It's just incredible, and I wish this movie was remembered more for being how good it is, rather than for the fact that George Clooney and his director fought on it. I think that's really an unfortunate legacy for this amazing movie.
Wait, why aren't you mentioning Ice Cube at all?
Oh, that's right, the Cube. I forgot about the Cube. I don't know. Maybe
He's the third king.
Maybe it's because I'm mad at him for being anti-Semitic.
Well, okay.
Yeah, because that one hurt. Because I really wanted to love him.
Fair enough.
And for some reason, I thought it was Spike Jonze, but he's like the fourth. He's the fourth wheel.
He's the fourth king.
Yeah, he's the fourth king. My number 2 movie is Being John Malkovich. Speaking of Spike Jonze, Being John Malkovich just blew my mind the first time I saw it. It was such a cool concept for a movie. John Cusack finds a little door in his office that when he goes into, it's kind of like Coraline, where he finds this little door and he goes down the door and the door leads into John Malkovich's brain, and he can see everything that John Malkovich is saying and doing. And I don't know where this idea came from or why it works so well as a movie, but it really does. And the coup, of course, the big thing in the movie is getting John Malkovich to play John Malkovich. And everything about it works. It's funny, it's quirky, it's weird. It's just a delight. And then my number 1 is a movie that we talked about at great length on the podcast, and that is the journalism drama The Insider with Russell Crowe and Al Pacino. I just think it's a perfect movie. Christopher Plummer, of course, is in that as well. That's a Michael Mann film that I just really love, and I talked about it a lot on our podcast.
That's a really good list. So the funny thing is, a lot of your honorable mentions are in my list and vice versa, but not so much overlap in the actual top 10. And I think in the top 10, the only movies that we both have are, did you say The Sixth Sense?
I did not have that in my honorable mention or my top 10.
You don't like it?
I like it. I like it. I like it. I just don't love it. It's also a weird one where I saw it well after everyone else had seen it. I think it had kind of been spoiled for me, and I had been told that it was like the greatest thing ever. This is the coolest movie ever. And I was like, so I finally saw it, and it was like a Pimento moment for me. I was like, it's okay.
A Pimento moment?
Yeah, you remember in that Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode where Jake keeps trying to, Pimento has Memento. He's like, because Pimento's losing his memory. So he can't make new memories. He's like, oh yeah, Pimento has Memento. It's like that movie Memento where the guy is like, Jake, I haven't seen that movie. And Charles has something, oh yeah, it's more like Finding Dory. And he goes, oh yeah, okay, now I know exactly what you're talking about. So Jake keeps trying, talking about Memento, and finally at the end of the episode, Pimento, he gets his memories back, and he's like, oh, Jake, I finally saw that movie you were talking about. He goes, you saw Memento? He goes, yeah. It was okay. And Andy Samberg's face is just like, he's just devastated.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So then we only have 2 overlaps. I'll get to, they're The Insider and Being John Malkovich. I'll say where. But real quick, I'll run through my honorable mentions. The Green Mile, Magnolia, The Iron Giant, Go, which I just watched for the first time and thought was very cool. Arlington Road, which I think is a very, very underrated thriller. Mark Pellington movie starring Jeff Bridges and Joan Cusack and Tim Robbins about terrorism, like domestic terrorism. Before there was Arab terrorism, there was like all this Jim Jones, we're really afraid of white people who live in the woods type terrorism, and that's about. It's cool. Three Kings, Bringing Out the Dead, The Talented Mr. Ripley, Blast from the Past, which was the other movie that our 1999 episode was about, and then Luc Besson's The Messenger, which I did a whole little YouTube defense of because I think that movie's dope. Then my number 10 is The Insider. which we did our 1999 episode about. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I liked it a lot, and I'm glad that you gave it to me for Never Did It. My number 9 is The Straight Story, David Lynch's movie starring Richard Farnsworth about a guy who drives a lawnmower across the United States to go visit his brother who's just had a stroke. Really touching movie. It's the kind of movie that people watched and thought it didn't feel like a Lynch movie, but I feel like those people hadn't seen a lot of Lynch movies because there's plenty of Lynchisms in there. It's great. It's a movie about like what it means to be alive and to be old and to think about what comes next, and that's all very Lynchian. My number 8 is Office Space, the Mike Judge comedy. Yeah, I just think this movie's great and really funny and holds up, even though a lot of office culture has changed. I still think this holds up. This is seen as sort of like a peak Gen X movie, and I'm a millennial and I still think it's awesome. My number 7 is The Sixth Sense. It's M. Night Shyamalan's breakout. Great Bruce Willis performance. Haley Joel Osment's breakout performance. Not his first movie, that would be Forrest Gump. This came, I think, 5 years later, and yeah, he's wonderful in it. It's got a little Misha Barton cameo for OC heads. It's got a really good Toni Collette performance. Yeah, I just think this movie rocks, and I did not know the twist when I saw it in the theater as a 15 or 16-year-old, and it blew me away. And I still think it's a good movie. My number 6 is The Matrix, which I haven't revisited in a long time. And it's funny because when I think of The Matrix, I'm like, I like this a lot less than most people, but I still have it at number 6 on my top 10 of 1999 list. So I clearly like it a lot. But I remember when I saw it the first time on VHS in my friend Justin's house on a small TV, I was like, why do people love this? And then I watched it on a big screen later. I was like, I get it now. This is a cool movie.
Yeah, it's one of those movies, and I saw it a little bit later after the fact too, but it's one of those movies where I like it less too, but the people who are devoted to it are like so devoted to it. And whether or not, like I said, I don't love it, like they do, but I mean, it fundamentally changed action movies, no question about it. I mean, it's a very highly influential movie, and it certainly earned its place in history. I mean, the sequels are a whole nother matter, but that original is it's a classic.
It's great. And it changed action movies for the better. I mean, it introduced a lot of people to Eastern action movies, which it isn't one, but it got people like curious about Kung Fu movies and just other martial arts movies in general. It's great. Yep. My number 5 is a movie we've argued about a lot in our David Fincher podcast, but it's Fight Club. I recommend people go and find our David Fincher episode. I think it's a very good episode of podcasting. And if you like David Fincher, we talk a lot about all of his movies. My number 4 is a movie I'm curious your opinion of. It's Dan Parasote's Galaxy Quest. Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, and I've actually seen it fairly recently too. I really like Galaxy Quest. I think I probably have it at like 3.5 stars or something like that. It's not in my top 20, but that's again because I spoke about what a great year this is for so many great movies. But yeah, I think Galaxy Quest is a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it.
I think it's just such a great send up of sci-fi television, and I love it for that. And also, it is Tim Allen's best live action role. Alan Rickman is hilarious in it. Rainn Wilson has a little role in it, unexpected. It's really fun. Sigourney Weaver is like probably the hottest she's ever been in Galaxy Quest.
And the Rock. Yeah. Don't forget about The Rock.
The Rock?
Sam Rockwell.
Oh God. It's like The Rock is not in this. There's a
Sam the Rock Rockwell?
No, Sam Rockwell's in it. There's a giant rock creature in it.
Yeah.
Rockwell's very funny in it too. And Justin Long has a funny little cameo in it too.
That's right, he does, yeah.
Yeah. My number 3 is South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. I'm obviously like a giant animation head. Like you had Toy Story 2, I think in your honorable mentions.
Yep.
It's my number 2. So like I have my number 2 and 3 are both animated films. And this was a great year for like high profile animated movies that weren't your regular Disney fare. So you had Toy Story 2, which was a sequel, kind of annoying, and South Park, which is based on a TV show. But I still think that movie is so funny. Me and my wife, my sister, and my brother-in-law all just went to see Book of Mormon. I'd seen it once before. It holds up. It's so funny. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, it's very South Parky, and it has all the same things that I like about the South Park movie. What's your feeling about the South Park movie?
I haven't probably seen it since it came out. And I remember at the time thinking that it was like, okay, but more than I needed of South Park at the time, where I was like 30 minutes of South Park is enough for me. At the time, but honestly, I don't think I've watched the movie since it came out.
I think you'd like it more now.
I think I would too.
It's really good. And so, like I said, Toy Story 2 is my number 2, and then Being John Malkovich is my number 1. I saw it during the pandemic. My wife was like, we have to watch Being John Malkovich. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, fine, let's do that. And I left it thinking, this is so imaginative. This is so creative. It's such a great encapsulation of the things that Charlie Kaufman is into. He wrote the movie, and Spike Jonze is such a great director to bring Charlie Kaufman vision to life. I just saw this movie. Actually, it's interesting because I have Shyamalan and Jones and Kaufman rather both on this list. Yesterday, I went to the theater and I saw Strange Darling, which I can't say much about because you haven't seen it, but also just like it's the kind of movie that you'd be such a jerk to say anything about the plot because it's so dependent on the plot, enjoying it and not knowing anything about it. In fact, I think you should see it, and you should know nothing about it before you see it. But it reminded me a lot. It felt like someone took a Tarantino movie or a Tarantino sensibility and an M. Night Shyamalan sensibility and mashed them into a movie. And it's very good. And it's a lot of the same things that I liked about The Sixth Sense are happening in Strange Darling. Oh, there's nothing supernatural in Strange Darling. And then I saw Between the Temples, which is a new Jason Schwartzman movie. And it feels very indebted to Charlie Kaufman in a way that I found annoying. And I sometimes find Charlie Kaufman annoying. Like, I think Schenectady, New York is unbearable.
I haven't seen it since I saw it at the theater, but I had a really hard time with that.
Yeah, I think it's like an impossible... I mean, some people love it, but I found it impossible.
Yeah.
And I kind of, by the end of Between the Temples, I started feeling the same way. So it's interesting that the big directors of the late 90s, or, well, the 90s in general, but the late 90s specifically, are now, 25 years later, reinfecting the movie. At least indie movies. But a lot of them were indie directors back then and then became mainstream directors. So.
Right.
Cool stuff. All right. We've got like 5 or 6 more of these we have to do that we screwed up. So keep an eye out for some old, some new, some red, some blue. I don't know. Talk to you later.